This disgusting, worthless goblin named Choi Hyungmin was reflecting on his miserable life and thought that, in the face of lust, all humans tended to become foolish, and that most men were losers who were blinded by it. He further believed that many women were also worthless in that regard, and that losers only existed to be crushed under his gross feet. He often used women for his own benefit and considered himself a man who felt entitled to all of this, concluding that this was exactly who he was. Afterwards, his head began to hurt severely, and he thought that he had drunk too much the previous night. When he woke up, a girl was standing in front of him, shouting and asking about another boy. He found her extremely loud and irritating. She accused him of already moving on to another girl, while he struggled to understand what she was saying. Soon after, she left the room, and he thought that he had nothing to do with her and needed to get hangover medicine. However, his body began to feel weak, and he could not understand what was happening, while his chest felt unusually heavy. Meanwhile, Icy had gone outside the house where a man was standing near the security guard, saying that he had been hearing thumping sounds from the first floor. She assumed that he was the married man from downstairs. He was talking with the guard, and although he seemed like a loser at first glance to her, she continued walking through the area. She noticed that all the men were staring at her, which confused her, as she had never experienced such attention before. She then entered a medical store to ask for hangover medicine, but the shopkeeper asked her if she needed a man instead. He looked at her in a creepy way, which made her realize she needed to leave. Before she could respond properly, her voice came out very feminine, shocking her further. Embarrassed, she ran back home. When she looked into the mirror, she discovered that she had completely transformed into a beautiful woman. Shocked and confused, she immediately began searching for answers about how a man could turn into a woman. Suddenly, a small monster appeared before her. It confirmed that her transformation was not normal and questioned her reaction. She asked why this had been done to her. The monster replied that she had been quick to understand, and then explained that she had been pranked by people online by pretending to be a girl and making men fall for her. Although she considered it a simple prank, the victims had been deeply hurt and devastated. Their accumulated resentment and hatred eventually reached the monster, which led it to place a powerful curse on her that changed her gender. Hyungmin became increasingly frustrated and argued that it had only been harmless stress relief, claiming he was simply teaching those losers blinded by lust where they belonged and that he had not meant any harm. He demanded that the monster turn him back into a man immediately. However, the monster asked if he truly wanted to know how he could become male again. It explained that, in order to reverse the curse, he would have to repay those men he had deceived by satisfying them, which shocked him greatly. The monster added that, if he continued refusing, his pain would increase significantly and he would suffer through every level of it. It then proceeded to assign him a female name, stating that it suited his identity during his deception. It suggested the name Park Ah-young, explaining that it was the same identity he had used while fooling men online. The monster also introduced a mission system displayed on his phone, saying that completing the missions might give him a chance to turn back into a man, while ignoring them would lead to penalties. After delivering this, the monster disappeared, warning him not to forget the conditions. Now fully transformed into a woman, she thought that it had already been 3 days since the strange creature had appeared. She had been ignoring the mission prompts on her phone, which required her to interact with different men through full Baddie training session. She refused to comply, believing she had enough money to manage on her own and would eventually find another way back. However, she began to notice strange bodily sensations and decided she needed a bath, as it had been a long time since she last took one. While bathing, she observed her new body in shock but reassured herself that she would not let the situation break her, insisting that she was not a loser. After coming out of the bathroom, a status window appeared in front of her showing that a penalty had been applied and that her lust level had increased to level 3. She ignored it again, but soon began feeling stronger sensations. In response, she started doing her self-training exercises alone in her bedroom, thinking that the creature had been right and that the penalty had already begun affecting her. She firmly decided that she would never complete the missions involving men. However, while she was exercising, someone knocked on her door. A man outside asked if anyone was inside, claiming he had been hearing loud noises from her room. When she opened the door, the same man from earlier became angry and shouted that he lived in the unit below and had been disturbed by the noise. But upon seeing her, his anger suddenly faded. She then asked him if he would like to come inside so they could talk about the situation. Park Ah-young was quietly reflecting on her life, as if trying to trace everything back to its origin. In her thoughts, she concluded that it had all started from what seemed like a very minor misunderstanding at first. From her perspective, her intentions had always been simple. She believed she was only trying to show certain people their proper place. In particular, she thought about those men she referred to as losers, the ones who constantly struggled to gain attention from women, and often behaved desperately in their attempts to impress them. In her inner judgment, she saw them as individuals whose minds had become weakened over time due to rejection and isolation. She believed that many of them could not accept being left behind, and because of that insecurity, they would eventually lose their dignity despite trying to appear confident. Even if they acted otherwise on the surface, she assumed that, in the end, they would always end up giving in and revealing their true desperation. As her thoughts drifted forward, she was brought back to the present moment. She now found herself standing directly in front of a man. Without fully considering the situation, she invited him to come inside her home. The man, however, responded in a calm and somewhat detached manner, explaining that he actually lived downstairs. After that, he began asking whether she was the girlfriend of the person who lived in the apartment, and he continued questioning her about her boyfriend with mild curiosity. Despite his questions, Ah-young kept insisting that he should come inside. After a short hesitation, the man eventually agreed and entered the apartment with her. Once inside, he immediately asked if she was all right, since he had seen her fall onto the floor earlier. At that moment, Ah-hong became slightly aware of a strange feeling within herself, a subtle, emotional shift that she did not fully understand. Though she quickly tried to suppress it, she simply responded that she was fine, avoiding any further explanation. When the man attempted to step closer to help her stand properly, she quickly reacted by telling him not to touch her. The man, however, responded in a calm tone, remarking that she did not even seem to have enough strength at that moment and insisting that he was only trying to assist her. As he spoke, he continued to approach carefully, maintaining that his intention was purely to help her regain balance and reach the living room safely. In that moment, Ah-young became increasingly aware that her body was not responding the way she wanted it to. Even though she tried to move or resist internally, she felt physically constrained, as if her strength had diminished. This led her to suspect that the situation was being influenced in a way she could not fully control, and she began to believe that the man might be deliberately taking advantage of her weakened condition. The man, still maintaining a composed attitude, reassured her once again that he would only guide her until she reached the living room, and nothing beyond that. While supporting her, he happened to notice the interior of her room. His attention briefly shifted to the scattered items present there, and after observing them, he made a light and teasing remark, suggesting that she appeared to have a rather playful nature. He then continued speaking in a joking tone, implying that he now understood certain things about her personality and habits based on what he had seen. He further added that, given her apparent energy and focus on certain repetitive activities, it seemed like they could have done structured physical training sessions together earlier. His tone remained casual, though slightly teasing, as he mentioned that she appeared to be quite dedicated to strengthening her fine motor movements. These remarks caused Ah-young to feel a surge of frustration and humiliation. Internally, she imagined that if she had been a man at that moment, she would have ended the situation immediately and violently, without hesitation. However, in reality, she recognized her physical weakness and the fact that she had no real ability to act on such thoughts. Her body felt unresponsive, and she remained in a powerless state. Eventually, despite the tension between them, the situation transitioned into them engaged in calorie-burning session together. After the session was completed, the man left the apartment without further interaction, leaving Ah-young alone in the quiet space. For a brief moment, everything seemed still again, as if nothing had happened. However, shortly afterward, her phone began to vibrate. When she checked it, she saw a message from the monster informing her that her lust level had been reduced to 0. The message was followed by a direct question asking whether she had clearly understood all the rules imposed upon her. Before she could fully process the message, the monster suddenly appeared in front of her. Startled and immediately defensive, Ah-young questioned whether it had been responsible for sending the man from downstairs into her apartment. The monster, however, calmly denied any involvement, stating that it had done nothing of the sort. It explained that the man had come upstairs on his own, since he had seen her engaging in endurance training alone and had witnessed everything that had happened. According to the monster, the man had simply responded to what he observed naturally. The monster further commented that she should consider herself fortunate, as stabilizing the situation would otherwise have been significantly more difficult. It also implied that the man had unintentionally helped regulate her condition through his presence and interaction. Hearing this, Ah-young's anger intensified internally. She silently vowed that if she ever regained a stronger form, she would eliminate the monster without hesitation and destroy everything associated with it. These thoughts remained trapped in her mind, as she was fully aware that she had no real power in that moment. The monster then warned her again in a firm tone, reminding her to recognize her place and not resist the structure of the situation she was bound by. Despite her efforts, Ah-young could not comprehend the true nature of the being standing before her, nor could she act against it in any meaningful way. After issuing its final warnings, the monster eventually disappeared, leaving her alone once more. Later in the evening, Ah-young decided to leave her home and go outside for a while. As she walked through the surroundings, she became aware of people noticing her presence, with several men briefly turning their attention toward her appearance as she passed by. Park Ah-young quietly reflected on her life, feeling as though she had finally managed to confirm something that she had been trying to avoid admitting to herself for a very long time. The fitness conditioning she had with the man living downstairs had temporarily calmed the urges and restlessness that had been constantly building up inside her mind and body. For a short period of time, she had genuinely believed that those feelings had finally settled down. However, not long afterward, the same emotions slowly started accumulating again, returning even stronger than before and leaving her frustrated with herself. While lying there lost in thought, she kept thinking that she hated men more than anything. Even so, despite those feelings, she still found herself forced into situations where she had to rely on men for those high-intensity cardio training. The contradiction irritated her deeply. As her gaze slowly lowered toward the clothes she was wearing, she thought to herself that at the very least they were comfortable enough. Even such a small thought managed to distract her mind for a moment before her memories drifted back toward everything that had happened recently. She recalled how long she had spent denying her own situation and refusing to acknowledge what she truly wanted. Yet after continuously trying to suppress those feelings, she eventually reached the point where she could no longer avoid reality. In the end, she felt as though she had been left with no other choice except to perform those cardiovascular training with someone. What made it even worse for her was the fact that the man she ended up doing it with had been that loser living downstairs. Just remembering it made her feel pathetic and disgusted with herself. She hated the fact that she had allowed things to reach that point, and she sincerely never wanted to repeat an experience like that ever again. Still, no matter how much she tried denying it, she knew deep down that one day she would eventually have to do it again with someone else. However, if that moment ever came, she wanted things to be completely different this time. She wanted the person to be someone truly skilled and experienced in those fat-burning cardio, someone who perfectly matched the standards she had in mind. More importantly, she wanted him to be someone who did not know anything about her real identity and someone she would never encounter again once everything was over. She wanted the entire thing to remain distant and detached from her actual life. Above all else, the person absolutely had to be someone of her own choosing, someone who fit the ideal image she carried in her mind. Thinking about all of that, she gradually convinced herself that perhaps she really had to go this far if she truly wanted to find the right person. After reaching that conclusion, Park Ah-young eventually began posting videos online in search of a man for partner conditioning training. While doing so, she thought that there was probably no place more suitable for something like this than an anonymous space on the internet where nobody truly knew each other. The moment her posts started gaining attention, countless men immediately began flooding her messages. One after another, they sent their pictures, appearances, and introductions in hopes of becoming her chosen training partner. As she looked through all of those profiles, she tried convincing herself that this was no different from the games she used to play casually in the past. She attempted to treat the entire situation as though it was just another form of entertainment rather than something serious. Even then, however, she still could not bring herself to tolerate complete idiots. The more profiles she checked, the more disappointed she became. Most of the men seemed either desperate, unattractive, or completely lacking in the qualities she wanted. She kept thinking that among all of them, there was not even a single normal man who seemed perfect enough to stand beside her in a partnership. Then, after endlessly scrolling through one profile after another, someone finally caught her attention. Compared to the others, he appeared noticeably better. There was something about him that immediately stood out from the crowd. Without wasting much time, she sent him a message and asked him to properly reveal his face. However, instead of immediately obeying her request, he replied by pointing out that she had not revealed her own face either. He casually stated that because of that, he was only willing to show half of his face for now. Not long afterward, he admitted something else as well. He told her that, rather than being interested in the endurance training themselves, he was actually more interested in her personally. Surprisingly, Park Ah-young did not dislike his response. Instead, she found it somewhat interesting. Deep inside, she started convincing herself that perhaps what she was really doing was trying to find herself a better man than the ones she had encountered before. After all, she did not consider herself a loser, nor did she see herself as some pathetic woman desperately chasing after attention. Back when she had lived as a man, there were many things she had never truly understood. But now, experiencing everything from this side made her realize just how obvious and exhausting men's gazes could actually be. At that moment, she finally understood why women often complained about how draining those stares were. Before, she had assumed they were exaggerating, but now she realized they had never been speaking without reason. The constant attention, the desperate messages, and the overwhelming gazes from countless men slowly made anxiety rise inside her once again. That same unpleasant and sick feeling began crawling back into her chest, making her feel mentally exhausted. After reaching that point, she honestly no longer knew what she was even supposed to think anymore. Then suddenly, not long afterward, she went outside and unexpectedly encountered the same man she had been talking to online. The moment he saw her, he calmly stated that he had been able to recognize her even from far away. Standing there in front of her, he appeared even more handsome than she had expected. His appearance alone immediately separated him from the countless other men she had looked through earlier. As he observed her appearance, he casually commented that he believed she would probably look much better without the cap she was wearing. Without hesitation, he reached out and removed her cap himself. The moment she properly saw his face at close distance, she realized once again that he was genuinely good-looking. Seeing her slightly awkward reaction, he smiled faintly before commenting that he had not expected her to be the shy type of person. His tone sounded relaxed and natural, almost as though he was already comfortable around her. Afterward, he casually asked whether she attended these kinds of offline meetings often these days. Once the atmosphere settled slightly, he mentioned that since they had already seen each other's faces, they should at least exchange names. Introducing himself first, he confidently told her that his name was Kim Do-jun, before asking for her own name in return. Meanwhile, Park A-young quietly stared at him, while reflecting on the strange feeling she had already sensed during their online conversations. At first, she had only suspected it vaguely, but now that they were standing face to face, she became completely certain of it. Although Kim Do-jun felt slightly different from the other men she had encountered before, he still ultimately belonged to the exact same category of men she used to know so well in the past. Because of that realization, she immediately drew a line between them. In a cold and detached tone, she told him that she did not care about his name at all, because they were only going to do the full-body training session together. Park A-young looked directly at Kim Do-jun, before immediately asking him whether he had already reserved the room and where exactly it was located. Her tone sounded cold and straightforward, as though she wanted to get directly to the point without wasting unnecessary time. To her, there was no reason to continue standing around outside talking endlessly when both of them already understood why they had met in the first place. However, instead of immediately answering her question, Kim Do-jun remained standing there quietly while staring at her for a brief moment. His expression carried a relaxed calmness that almost seemed out of place compared to her impatient attitude. After a short silence, he softly admitted that he did not really want things between them to end too quickly. Then, with the same calm expression on his face, he told her that she did not need to be in such a hurry. The moment she heard those words, irritation instantly started rising inside her again. Her expression slightly hardened as she looked at him with visible frustration. To her, his response sounded completely unnecessary, and she quickly told him not to say meaningless nonsense like that. At the same time, her thoughts immediately became more complicated. Deep inside, she started wondering whether he had actually come there for the same purpose as her, or whether he was the type of man who wanted to turn everything into some emotional connection. While looking at him, she internally thought that he really was exactly like the type of men who became overly excited the moment they heard about those kinds of high-intensity cardio training. Even if he acted calm and different on the surface, his reactions still reminded her of ordinary men. That realization only made her frustration grow stronger. However, instead of getting offended by her words, Kim Do-jun simply admitted that what she said was true. He calmly acknowledged that he was definitely interested in those fitness conditioning. Yet, at the same time, he honestly confessed that he was also genuinely interested in her herself. As he continued speaking, his tone remained surprisingly relaxed and natural. He admitted that the feeling she gave him was strangely amusing, but he also said that he did not really know how to properly describe it with words. While observing her carefully, he explained that although she looked extremely delicate and feminine on the outside, there was something about her presence that strangely reminded him of a strong man internally. According to him, that contrast was what made her particularly interesting. Hearing those words unexpectedly caused Park A-young to feel slightly embarrassed for a brief moment. The comparison caught her off guard because it felt strangely accurate in a way she did not want to admit. Even so, she immediately tried suppressing that reaction before it became obvious on her face. With a colder expression, she reminded him once again that she had already warned him not to continue speaking nonsense if he expected her to keep talking to him properly. Her voice carried irritation, but beneath that irritation there was also a slight sense of discomfort because his observations felt more perceptive than she had expected. Rather than becoming awkward after being warned, Kim Do-jun simply smiled faintly. He casually told her that she was cute as well. Then he admitted that he personally did not enjoy rushing directly into things right away, without even taking time to enjoy the atmosphere first. His attitude remained calm and confident the entire time. As he slowly stepped closer toward her, the distance between them gradually disappeared. Then, without acting forcefully, he gently pulled her slightly closer toward himself before quietly suggesting that they should perform the calorie-burning session together. For a brief moment, Park Ah-young simply stared at him silently. Even though his personality frustrated her, she could not deny that he felt noticeably different from the desperate men she had encountered online earlier. After that, she decided to stop wasting time and began explaining all of the rules and conditions related to the full-body training session. Her tone became serious as she carefully described the boundaries she expected him to follow. She made sure to explain everything clearly, so there would not be any misunderstandings later. More than anything else, she wanted to maintain control over the situation and prevent things from becoming emotionally complicated. Throughout her explanation, Kim Do-jun quietly listened without interrupting her even once. Instead of joking around, he calmly paid attention to every condition she mentioned. His relaxed expression remained unchanged the entire time, making it difficult for her to fully understand what he was actually thinking. Once their conversation finally came to an end, both of them eventually started heading toward the motel together. Both of them clearly understood the reason they were together at that moment, even without openly discussing it further. Eventually, after arriving at the motel, the two of them entered the room together. The atmosphere inside immediately became quieter and more enclosed compared to outside. For a brief moment, neither of them said anything unnecessary. Not long afterward, both Park Ah-young and Kim Do-jun finally began performing the conditioning training together. During the fat-burning cardio session, Kim Do-jun secretly took several pictures of Park Ah-young. Even after the session ended, he continued keeping those photos on his phone while casually looking through them, as though it was completely natural for him to do so. The moment Park Ah-young noticed what he had done, her expression immediately changed. Without hesitation, she reached toward his phone and told him that he needed to delete every single picture immediately. However, before she could properly grab the device, Kim Do-jun quickly pulled his phone back away from her reach. Looking at her calmly, he told her that she could not simply touch someone else's phone and delete things whenever she wanted. His relaxed reaction only made her even more frustrated. As he looked at her panicked expression, he casually pointed out that she had not acted like this the previous day when she herself had been excited about the cardiovascular training too. According to him, she needed to face reality properly instead of constantly trying to deny everything afterward. He then admitted that the way she kept trying to reject her own feelings and actions was honestly fascinating to him. Hearing those words only made Park Ah-young feel more uncomfortable. Her expression stiffened as she immediately requested him once again to please delete all of the pictures and videos. She insisted that filming things like that was not really appropriate in the first place, and that she did not want those moments remaining on his phone. Kim Do-jun listened quietly before casually replying that deleting them was not actually difficult for him at all. However, he honestly admitted that simply erasing everything immediately would feel boring to him. Looking directly at her, he confessed that he wanted to continue seeing different sides of her. According to him, if they simply parted ways after everything ended, she would probably never try looking for him again. The moment he said those words, Park Ah-young suddenly realized something important. Deep down, she understood that he had already seen through her personality from the very beginning. He already knew that she was the type of person who would try cutting ties completely the moment things became emotionally complicated. Then, with a faint smile on his face, Kim Do-jun suddenly suggested making a bet with each other. He calmly explained that if she won the bet, he would immediately delete every picture and video exactly as she wanted. Not only that, but he also promised that he would never appear in front of her again afterward. However, if he ended up winning instead, then he would get her phone number, and the next time they met, she would have to go on a proper date with him. That proposal immediately surprised Park Ah-young. She stared at him in disbelief, because the conditions felt completely unexpected to her. Meanwhile, Kim Do-jun casually continued explaining the rules of the bet, as though it was the most natural thing in the world. According to him, the challenge itself was actually simple. She only needed to successfully complete a special type of conditioning training session with him within 10 minutes. If she managed to do it successfully during that time, then she would win the bet. However, if she failed, then it would count as her loss. After explaining everything clearly, he calmly stated that they were going to start the challenge immediately. Although Park Ah-young felt irritated by the entire situation, her pride refused to back down from his challenge. Because of that, she eventually prepared herself seriously for the bet. After some time had passed, both of them were finally leaving the motel together. Unlike Park Ah-young, whose expression looked visibly irritated and exhausted, Kim Do-jun walked beside her with a satisfied smile on his face. Looking completely relaxed, he casually told her that he would see her again the next time he decided to call her. He even teasingly added that she should wait patiently for him until then. After saying that, he jokingly mentioned that she could contact him first if she wanted to as well. Hearing him speak so confidently immediately made Park Ah-young even more frustrated. At that moment, she finally had no choice but to admit the truth to herself. In the end, she had completely lost the bet. No matter how hard she had tried during the challenge, she still could not succeed within the required time. Coming back to the present moment, Kim Do-joon calmly reassured her not to worry, because he had no intention of posting any of her pictures or videos online. Then, while looking at her seriously, he admitted something else honestly. He said that simply watching those pictures alone already felt sinful enough because it made him feel like he wanted to keep every side of her entirely to himself. According to him, perhaps he was becoming possessive without realizing it. Afterward, he softly reminded her once again that he would see her next time for their date and that he was genuinely looking forward to it. Once he finished speaking, he eventually left, leaving Park Ah-young standing there alone in frustration. As she watched him walk away, she internally cursed his personality while thinking about how unbelievably annoying he truly was. More than anything else, she felt angry at herself because, in the end, her own reasoning still could not completely overcome the desires and reactions of her current body. Eventually, she returned home by herself. After arriving there, she quietly prepared a cup of coffee before slowly drinking it while sitting alone. As the warmth spread through her body, she thought that it had honestly been a very long time since she had managed to relax even slightly like this. At that moment, the peaceful feeling surprisingly felt perfect to her. However, that moment of calmness did not last very long. Suddenly, while scrolling through her phone, she received another message request from some random loser asking her to participate in another fat-burning cardio session together. The moment she read the message, irritation immediately appeared on her face again. She internally thought that there was absolutely no way she would ever accept a request like that from someone so pathetic. Then, another thought suddenly crossed her mind. Considering everything she had already done up until now, she started wondering whether she should have accumulated at least a few points by now to return back into being a man again. The monster had constantly pushed her into doing all sorts of ridiculous things, yet she still did not even know how to properly check her points or progress. Because of that, she immediately started scrolling through her phone while trying to find information regarding her score. However, the moment she finally managed to check it properly, her expression completely froze. Her total score was still exactly 0. The sight instantly filled her with anger and disbelief. Frustration quickly exploded inside her once again as she angrily thought that the monster had obviously been watching her the entire time. Almost immediately afterward, the monster itself suddenly appeared in front of her once again. The creature casually greeted her by saying that it knew she had been waiting impatiently for it to appear again. The moment she saw it, Park Ah-young completely lost her patience. She immediately started shouting at the monster, angrily complaining that she had already done every insane thing it told her to do, yet her score still remained at 0. To her, it felt as though the creature had been scamming and manipulating her the entire time. However, the monster simply looked at her calmly before reminding her that it had already explained everything very clearly from the beginning. According to it, simply having cardiovascular training sessions with random men would only temporarily lower her growing desires and nothing more. It would not automatically reward her with points. The monster then mocked her slightly by saying that she really did not listen properly whenever someone explained things to her carefully. It reminded her that it had already described the conditions in detail before. Then the creature pointed out something else as well. It stated that, instead of seriously trying to achieve her goal, she had gradually started enjoying herself during those high-intensity cardio training. Comparing Kim Do-joon with the older man living downstairs, the monster remarked that she clearly seemed to like the newer guy much more while training together with him. Hearing all of that made Park Ah-young fall silent for a moment. Deep inside, she slowly realized that perhaps the monster was not entirely wrong. All she had truly done, until now, was continuously satisfy and suppress her growing desires without actually progressing toward her goal at all. Because of that, she had not received a single reward and instead had ended up humiliating herself in front of multiple men while acting like a completely unstable woman. Unable to accept that reality, she angrily denied everything in her mind. The monster then looked at her before, casually suggesting that perhaps living as a woman was not actually as terrible as she kept claiming it was. According to the creature, it seemed like she was slowly starting to enjoy parts of it herself, and the men around her also appeared quite happy being with her. The moment she heard that, Park Ah-young suddenly started laughing loudly in frustration, before immediately shouting angrily at the monster once again. Meanwhile, the monster simply sighed, while calmly telling her to pull herself together properly. Park Ah-young received a fitness conditioning request from Jung-hoon. The moment she saw his name appear before her, irritation immediately crossed her mind. She did not genuinely want to accept the request, nor did she have any interest in spending her time with someone like him. However, after staring at the screen for a while, she eventually decided to accept it purely for the sake of gaining points. To her, it felt less like a choice, and more like something she was being forced into out of necessity. While making her decision, she bitterly thought to herself that she never performed calorie-burning session with losers like him, and the fact that she had been reduced to this situation only frustrated her further. After accepting the request, she quietly went to take a bath. The warm water ran over her body, but instead of helping her relax, it only caused her thoughts to spiral even deeper. She leaned back slightly while thinking that, in the end, she had simply returned back to square one. No matter how hard she tried to move forward, everything only seemed to become worse and worse for her. All of the full-body training sessions she had gone through until now had not truly solved anything. If anything, they had only erased the restraint that once kept the desires growing inside her under control. In reality, she felt as though none of those experiences had benefited her in any meaningful way. Instead of helping her, they had only weighed her down further. No matter how much she tried to suppress herself, no matter how much she forced herself to endure everything and resist through sheer determination, her mind had slowly started realizing something painful. It had realized that it could not completely overcome her body. That truth frustrated her deeply because she hated acknowledging it even to herself. As she lowered her gaze toward her own reflection, she quietly admitted in her thoughts that this was simply her body. It was the reality she could not escape from, no matter how desperately she wished to. She thought that if something like perfect restraint truly existed, then it would probably look exactly like this, a constant struggle where the mind endlessly tried to chain down the body while never fully succeeding. At that moment, the video Kim Do-jun had once taken of her suddenly resurfaced in her mind. The memory appeared so vividly that it made her expression stiffen. She remembered how she had looked back then, during the moment when she had not truly been acting like herself. In the eyes of others, she had appeared like a woman overflowing with desire, someone who had completely lost control over herself. Remembering that image of herself only made her chest feel heavier. Even now, she could still feel those unbearable thoughts lingering within her. The awareness of her own body had become so overwhelming that it almost felt impossible for her to escape from it. She hated the way her thoughts constantly drifted back toward those feelings, yet at the same time, she could not fully deny them either. That contradiction only made her feel even more restless. Trying to calm herself down somehow, she began a self-training program while sitting quietly by herself. As she focused on those repetitive movements, flashes of all the endurance training she had gone through with the two men replayed vividly in her mind one after another. Every memory returned clearly, making it harder for her thoughts to settle down. While remembering everything, she slowly started thinking that if things continued like this, she truly might never be able to go back to the way she used to be before all of this began. The realization disturbed her deeply. She became angry not only at herself, but also at the partners who had been involved with her during those workout sessions. She hated the fact that her situation had reached this point. Inside her mind, she repeatedly told herself that she could not continue living like this forever. She absolutely had to return to her original state somehow. No matter what happened, she needed to find another way. As her thoughts continued racing, she started convincing herself that perhaps there was still a method left for her. She thought that she simply needed to find another approach that would allow her to regain her original position again. At the same time, she also believed that choosing the right type of partner would make things easier for her to handle mentally. In her eyes, someone weak-minded and easy to manipulate would be much simpler to deal with. When she officially accepted Jung-hoon's request, his information immediately appeared on the status window before her eyes. The moment she looked through it, her expression filled with disgust. She instantly thought that he was an incredibly weird man and an absolutely pathetic loser. However, after staring at his information more carefully, she suddenly realized that he was actually the same person she had encountered before in the online game. That realization changed her perspective slightly. She quietly thought that perhaps this was actually better for her. The more weak-minded and inexperienced a man was, the easier he would be for her to control and handle. She convinced herself that all she had to do was shut her eyes tightly, endure everything for a short while, finish the workout session as quickly as possible, and gain the points she needed. To her, that was all this interaction was supposed to be. Meanwhile, Jung-hoon was walking alone, while looking at his phone and drawing female outfit designs. He remained completely immersed in his sketches, unaware that Park Ah-young was approaching him from behind. Suddenly, she called out to him and told him that she wanted to speak with him briefly. She casually added that it was nothing serious and that she had simply become a little interested in him. The moment he heard her voice and turned around to face her, surprise immediately spread across his face. He looked so shocked that he almost froze in place. Then, without even properly processing the situation, he panicked and hurriedly tried to escape while insisting that she must have mistaken him for somebody else. Park Ah-young watched him run away with visible confusion. She could not understand why he had reacted so strongly, just from seeing her. Yet, even while he was escaping, she could somehow still hear every thought running through his mind. It felt unnatural, but the thoughts reached her clearly regardless. She heard him internally thinking that she looked extremely scary, despite having a strangely attractive aura around her. He could not understand why someone like her was trying to talk to him in the first place. Part of him even wondered whether she was trying to donate something to him out of pity. Listening to those thoughts only made her feel as though she was going through one bizarre experience after another recently. At the same time, she viewed him as the perfect example of an unimaginably pathetic loser, the type of man who possessed absolutely zero immunity toward women. In her mind, she thought that dealing with someone like him would probably be easier for her because a person that inexperienced would naturally crumble under even a little attention. Eventually, Jung-hoon reached the other side of a cafe and sat down there by himself. Not long afterward, Park Ah-young approached him once again. This time, she calmly asked if she could look at the drawings on his phone because she had become curious about them. She also lightly commented that he had embarrassed her earlier by suddenly running away from her like that. As she began looking through the drawings on his phone, she genuinely complimented his work. She told him that his drawings were surprisingly good and that he was actually very talented at sketching. Hearing praise from her only made him more nervous. Even while sitting there in front of her, he struggled to focus properly because his attention constantly drifted toward her appearance and body instead. Meanwhile, Park Ah-young quietly observed his reactions. She realized that he could barely keep his thoughts organized simply because an attractive woman was sitting close to him and showing interest in him. To her, it was painfully obvious that he had no idea how to properly handle the situation. While continuing to scroll through his drawings, she casually remarked that, judging from his artwork, it looked like he had studied women's bodies quite carefully. She then told him that there was no reason for him to feel shy in front of her. Deep down, she became convinced that no matter how pathetic of a loser he was, he would never truly be capable of resisting her. However, contrary to her expectations, Jung-hoon suddenly stood up once again. He awkwardly apologized to her before quickly leaving once more, clearly trying his best to avoid her entirely. His reaction genuinely surprised her because she had never expected someone like him to run away from her repeatedly like that. Instead of being drawn toward her the way she assumed he would be, he seemed overwhelmed to the point of wanting to escape from the situation altogether. A few days later, Park Ah-young carefully dressed herself in an especially pretty outfit before heading out into the streets. The moment she stepped outside, she immediately became aware of the countless gazes surrounding her. Everywhere she walked, she could feel people turning their eyes toward her presence. As she continued walking through the street, the awareness of all that attention lingered heavily in her mind, making her think that every single person around her was staring directly at her. Park Ah-young continued reflecting on Jung-hoon for a long time, trying to understand him more deeply, rather than simply judging him from a distance. She thought that she could understand him better now because, in his entire life, he likely had never experienced attention or favor from a woman in a direct and personal way. Because of that, even a simple approach from a woman would feel overwhelming, unfamiliar, and even frightening for him. In her mind, it made sense that someone like him would panic or withdraw when approached so directly. To her, it was not mysterious anymore. It was simply the behavior of someone who had no experience handling women in real-life situations. She thought that she understood people like him very well. Offline, he appeared like nothing more than a loser who lacked confidence and composure. But online, that type of person often created an entirely different identity. She believed that behind screens, people like him escaped into games, chats, and fantasy environments where they could feel more important and more in control than they were in reality. Based on that understanding, she decided that directly approaching him in the usual way would not be effective. Instead, she concluded that she needed to enter his environment first and observe him from within. With that thought, she chose to anonymously join the social group chat where Jung-hoon was active. She made sure not to reveal her identity, carefully blending in while observing the space. However, when she first entered that group, she immediately found the atmosphere unpleasant. To her, it felt like a hangout full of strange, low-quality, and disgusting individuals. Even so, she reminded herself that despite how distasteful it felt, it was still the most efficient way to get closer to Jung-hoon. To increase her understanding of him, and to make her presence in that space more believable, she even forced herself to watch the magical girl anime that he liked. She had no genuine interest in it, but she treated it as part of her strategy. While acting like an innocent and harmless otaku in the chat, she carefully observed conversations and slowly gathered information about him. Through this process, she managed to identify his preferences and the type of personality he was drawn to. Eventually, she discovered what he considered his ideal type. He preferred a girl who resembled characters from fantasy stories, especially magical girl archetypes like Rurika. In his imagination, the ideal girl had soft and appealing physical features, a cute and delicate appearance, and a personality that was devoted entirely to one person. Most importantly, she would be someone single-hearted, focused only on him, and emotionally attached to him alone. After understanding this, Park Ah-young began thinking about how simple his desire actually was. Instead of being complicated or unreachable, it was predictable and straightforward once understood properly. She decided internally that she would turn that ideal into reality for him. She made a firm decision that she would become exactly the type of girl he wanted to see in front of him. In her mind, she would become the devoted girl who only looked at him, the single-hearted presence that matched his fantasy perfectly. Once she had decided on this approach, she carefully prepared her appearance specifically for that purpose. She chose her outfit with deliberate attention, making sure it aligned with the image she intended to project. As people looking at her, some people stared openly while passing by, and others quietly commented to each other, but she did not respond to any of it. She ignored all of those reactions because, in her mind, none of those people mattered or had any relevance to her goal. While walking forward, she continued thinking about Jung-hoon and how his reactions would likely change once she appeared in a form closer to his ideal. She believed that if she matched his preferences closely enough, his defensive guard would naturally weaken. At the same time, she felt a growing frustration when she thought about how strongly he was attached to Rurika, the fictional character he admired most. In her view, it was irritating that a fictional standard had such influence over his real expectations. That frustration then turned into a clearer idea in her mind. She realized that instead of competing with that ideal, she could simply embody it. If Rurika represented his strongest preference, then she would become the real-life version of that image. She would transform herself into something that directly mirrored his fantasy, as if that fictional character had stepped out of the screen and into reality specifically for him. Soon after, she arrived at the cafe where Jung-hoon was present. As she entered, the atmosphere inside shifted slightly due to her presence. One of the men inside looked at her with confusion and commented that she might have entered the wrong place. Another man observed her more closely and asked whether she was Parada Nim, reacting with uncertainty. While standing there and taking in the reactions, Park Ah-young carefully observed the people around her. She noticed that one of the men seemed relatively normal compared to the rest, which she mentally registered. At the same time, she also realized that another person present had not recognized her identity at all, which made her feel somewhat relieved. That small detail gave her reassurance, as it meant she could proceed without immediately exposing herself fully or drawing unwanted attention to who she really was. As the situation developed, one of the men mentioned that he initially thought people might feel awkward if he revealed that he was a woman. Hearing this, she silently processed the information while continuing to observe the room. At the same time, she became increasingly aware of the attention and reactions directed toward her. The atmosphere felt heavy with focus on her presence, and although she found it mentally tiring and somewhat irritating, she understood that she had to endure it in order to achieve her objective. Soon afterward, the people inside the cafe began openly praising her appearance. They complimented her looks, her outfit, and her overall presence in an enthusiastic manner. Despite receiving all of this attention, Park Ah-young did not feel comforted or satisfied. Instead, she found the situation exhausting and slightly frustrating, as though she was being placed in a role she did not care about. To her, the scene felt strange, almost as if she had become a figure of admiration in a setting that did not matter to her personally. She felt detached from the praise, focusing only on her internal goal rather than the reactions of those around her. Even though the attention was directed toward her, she treated it as background noise that she needed to endure rather than engage with. In the end, she reminded herself once again that none of this social attention was her real purpose. Her only objective was still to gain points and move closer to Jung-hoon in the most effective way possible. As she carefully observed his behavior and reactions during the entire situation, she gradually became more confident that her approach was working exactly as intended on him. Park Ah-young remained seated beside Jung-hoon, carefully observing him for a moment before speaking again. After analyzing the atmosphere between them, she decided to adjust her tone slightly to appear more natural and less direct. In a calm and casual voice, she said that she really wanted to learn more things about gaming from him and asked if he could teach her sometime. Jung-hoon responded in a relaxed manner, saying that he could teach her whenever he had time. His reply was short and uncomplicated, but she still paid close attention to it. She noticed that his reaction was different from the previous time they had interacted. Earlier, he had seemed more tense and uncertain, but now his tone was more stable and composed. After a brief pause, she added that she had actually been waiting since earlier to ask him something. Then she pointed out the outfit he was wearing, saying that it looked like Rurika's outfit. She observed his reaction carefully while saying this, trying to see how strongly he was attached to that character. Jung-hoon immediately confirmed that it was indeed related to Rurika. Hearing his confirmation, she responded that she had recognized it as well. Then, in a slightly more personal tone, she admitted that she had honestly wanted to become a girl like that character. She also asked him directly if the outfit suited her properly, keeping her expression controlled while waiting for his response. Jung-hoon looked at her and told her that it suited her very well and that she looked extremely gorgeous. The moment she heard this, Park Ah-young did not show any outward reaction, but internally, she began analyzing his words in detail. She thought that his reaction was somewhat intense and exaggerated, and for a brief moment she assumed that he might be imagining some kind of romantic scenario in his mind, possibly even something like marriage. However, almost immediately after that thought, she corrected herself internally. She realized that his mindset was likely unstable and unrealistic, and that someone like him could easily jump to extreme thoughts without any real grounding in reality. She concluded that his thinking had no real connection to actual logic or real-life behavior, and that it should not be taken seriously beyond surface-level reactions. Soon after, Jung-hoon asked her if she was feeling all right. She replied that she was fine, but mentioned that she was a little hungry. She then suggested that they should go out and eat something. Her tone remained light, but internally she was already adjusting her plan based on how the situation was unfolding. At that moment, Jung-hoon's friends, who were sitting nearby, brought up that they had originally planned to go to a karaoke place first. One of them mentioned a coin karaoke session they had considered for practicing singing. The suggestion introduced a slight shift in the group's direction, creating a moment of discussion among them. Park Ah-young listened to this and internally dismissed the idea as unnecessary and uninteresting. She considered it a waste of time and attention, but she did not openly reject it in a strong way. Instead, she maintained a composed expression and once again emphasized that she was feeling hungry and would prefer to eat first. She subtly guided the conversation back toward going out for food, while still keeping her tone neutral and socially acceptable. One of the men in the group also said that he was already hungry. This helped support her suggestion, and gradually the group began leaning toward going out to eat instead. Jung-hoon himself did not oppose the decision and appeared indifferent, accepting whichever option the group preferred. Another person mentioned that they had already made a karaoke plan beforehand, but one of the others responded that since she was new, her preference should be considered first. Park Ah-young quietly observed this small disagreement within the group. She noted that in any group setting, there was usually at least one person who would slightly differ or resist the majority opinion. However, she did not focus on it for long, as it was not relevant to her main objective. In her mind, she reaffirmed once again that her attention and strategy were centered entirely on Jung-hoon, and everyone else was secondary and irrelevant to her goal. She also noticed that the others in the group were already reacting to her presence and appearance with visible admiration. Some looked at her more openly, while others tried to hide their attention, but she registered all of it internally, without engaging emotionally. To her, these reactions were predictable and did not require any response. After the discussion settled, the group eventually agreed to go out and eat together. They left the place and moved on to spend time together while having food. During this time, alcohol was also introduced, and the overall atmosphere became more relaxed and slightly less structured than before. Conversations became more casual, and the group dynamic softened as the time passed. Jung-hoon, while sitting there and observing her, continued to look at her appearance and thought to himself that she was already very pretty and had an attractive body as well. Park Ah-young noticed his gaze repeatedly shifting toward her, and she quietly registered this behavior without reacting outwardly. Internally, she remained focused on maintaining control over the situation and ensuring that everything continued moving in the direction she intended. At the same time, she thought about how important it was to guide the situation carefully so that it would not deviate from her goal. She remained mentally alert, continuously observing Jung-hoon's responses and adjusting her behavior accordingly. As the group continued eating and drinking together, the atmosphere gradually became more loose and disorganized in terms of conversation flow, but she still maintained her internal focus on Jung-hoon throughout the entire time. Park Ah-young was having a flashback of the earlier time at the bar, where everyone present had been looking at her and openly admiring her beauty. At that moment, she could clearly remember the constant feeling of being watched from all sides. Even now, as she recalled it, she felt that strange pressure again, as if those gazes were still surrounding her. As she reflected more deeply on the situation, she thought to herself that those guys had been acting strangely the entire time. Their behavior had not felt normal or balanced. It gave her the impression that she had missed something important while focusing too much on her original intention. It had been about an hour earlier when she first suggested that they play a drinking game. At that moment, she had spoken casually, expecting a simple reaction. However, the group's response had been more layered than she expected. Some of them had said that drinking games were typically more suited to extroverted people, while introverts like them usually avoided such things. Yet, despite that, they also admitted that it could still be entertaining in that particular situation. Jung-hoon had been there at that time as well, quietly observing her while she spoke and interacted with everyone. In his mind, he had been thinking that she was extremely beautiful and carried an unusual sense of closeness that he could not easily explain. While looking at her, he even had a fleeting thought that he might have imagined something like attending a formal family gathering with her someday, which showed how strongly her presence was affecting his thoughts at that moment. Meanwhile, Park Ah-young had initially believed that her focus was only supposed to be on Jung-hoon. However, as she observed the situation more carefully, she slowly realized that it was not limited to him alone. Almost all the boys present there were paying attention to her in some form or another. This realization changed how she interpreted the entire environment. It was no longer a simple one-on-one target situation. Instead, it had turned into a group dynamic where everyone's attention was unintentionally centered on her. As the game and drinking continued, she began to feel that the situation was becoming increasingly complicated. In her mind, she thought that she now had to deal with all of those men present there, rather than focusing on just one. She kept smiling and participating, but internally she started feeling that her behavior might be misunderstood. She worried that by continuing to act casually, they might interpret her as an easy or accessible target, someone who could be approached without hesitation. At the same time, she noticed that the atmosphere among the group was becoming more intense and slightly chaotic. Some of them began betting and competing in small ways, as if trying to position themselves closer to her attention. She found this behavior unsettling because it was not part of her original expectation. On top of that, she felt that Jung-hoon himself had become somewhat more expressive and involved during the game than before, which made her feel that her original plan was no longer fully under control. Internally, she thought that her plan had started to become unstable. The situation was no longer following a clean or predictable direction. However, she also observed something else that surprised her slightly. Even though the group appeared messy and immature on the surface, there was still a kind of internal structure among them. There were subtle roles and reactions that suggested hierarchy, even within what she considered a group of losers. At one point, someone in the group asked whether they should continue playing the drinking game. Another person pointed out that she was actually the one who had suggested it earlier. Hearing this, she internally felt a shift in responsibility, as if the situation was now partially attributed to her decision. At that moment, she began feeling increasingly frustrated. She thought that she no longer cared about Rurika or any of the earlier symbolic ideas she had been focusing on. What mattered now was simply controlling the situation again and regaining stability. The alcohol, the constant attention, and the chaotic interactions all contributed to a growing sense of discomfort in her mind. She felt as if her own body was reacting differently than usual, making it harder for her to maintain her normal sense of control. The continuous gazes from the men around her only intensified that feeling, making the entire environment feel heavier and more difficult to manage. During this time, one of the boys known as Snowman was present in the group. Another man, referred to as Akuma Nim, was also involved in the ongoing interactions. Several comments were exchanged among them during the game, including teasing remarks about how some participants were behaving too politely and needed to be more bold in such a setting. At the same time, another person criticized someone else for being overly aggressive toward her. These conflicting remarks created a noisy and uncomfortable atmosphere, making the entire situation feel even more overwhelming for her. Suddenly, Snowman interrupted the group. He asked the host whether this was truly the kind of meetup they had all been expecting. His tone made it clear that he was dissatisfied with how things had developed. He also commented that it felt like everyone was just missing the point and getting distracted. His interruption caused a brief pause in the chaotic flow of conversation, and for a moment, the group's energy shifted. After that, Snowman directly told her to come outside and instructed Akuma Nim to take care of Jung-hoon. Without waiting for further discussion, Snowman then carried Jung-hoon on his back. He casually mentioned that he would settle the bill later and told the others to continue whatever they wanted. He stated that he was leaving first, as if he had already decided to take responsibility for ending that part of the situation. Park Ah-young observed all of this in silence. Internally, she thought that Snowman's behavior was different from the others. He did not seem as chaotic or driven by the same impulsive energy as the rest of them. However, she also felt mentally drained from everything that had already happened, and her thoughts became slightly numb and less structured as the situation continued. After some time, Snowman, Park Ah-young, and Akuma Nim eventually ended up entering a motel due to the condition of the situation. Akuma Nim was responsible for assisting her because she had become too overwhelmed and unsteady from the events that had unfolded earlier. Snowman briefly thanked him for helping manage things. He then said that he would go to the room where Junghoon was, clean up the mess, wash his clothes, and return afterward. He instructed Akuma Nim to lay Park Ah-young down and meet him later at the motel convenience store, and Akuma agreed to this plan. Akuma Nim felt extremely exhausted at this point, as if the entire situation had drained him mentally. However, he still acknowledged Snowman's ability to handle everything efficiently. While looking at Park Ah-young lying there, he briefly found himself noticing her appearance, and that thought lingered in his mind for a moment longer than he expected. In that brief moment of confusion and exhaustion, he formed an intention that crossed boundaries, even though she was only partially conscious. However, before anything further could happen, Snowman suddenly returned to the room again, his presence immediately interrupting the situation. Akuma, the moment he noticed Snowman entering the room again, visibly jolted in shock. In a desperate tone, he insisted that what Snowman was seeing was not the full truth. He kept repeating that she had been the one who encouraged him, that she had somehow pushed the situation forward, and that he was not the one responsible for how things had escalated. His words became increasingly disorganized as he tried to justify himself. He also pointed back toward the drinking table situation, saying that everything had started there and that others should also be considered. However, his explanation sounded more like panic than logic. Snowman listened, but his expression remained firm and unchanging. There was no visible hesitation in his reaction. Instead, he stepped forward with a cold, decisive demeanor. Without allowing Akuma to continue his explanation, Snowman suddenly struck him. The impact immediately shut down Akuma's attempt to speak further. Snowman stated that he had already seen and heard enough from outside the room, and from his perspective, Akuma was clearly the one at fault for the situation. His tone was direct and final, leaving no room for negotiation. What followed was a full escalation. The tension in the room broke completely as Snowman continued to physically confront him. The situation turned into a serious and uncontrolled fight between the two, with no one else intervening effectively to stop it. The atmosphere became heavy, chaotic, and extremely unstable as the confrontation overtook the entire space. Park Ah-young, sitting in a corner of the room, felt completely overwhelmed by what she was witnessing. She had been trying to mentally separate herself from the situation, but the intensity made that impossible. Her breathing felt uneven, and her thoughts became scattered. She watched the fight unfold with a mixture of anxiety and disbelief, feeling trapped in the middle of a situation she no longer had control over. Unable to stay silent, she attempted to intervene verbally. Her voice came out strained as she called towards Snowman, telling him that if he continued like this, Akuma might not survive the situation. There was clear urgency in her tone, but it did not immediately break the momentum of what was happening. Snowman finally responded, but his tone was cold and unyielding. He stated that Akuma's actions were reckless, and that someone like him deserved severe consequences. His words made it clear that he was not viewing the situation lightly. After a brief moment, he shifted his attention toward Park Ah-young and asked her directly if she had any solution or suggestion regarding what should be done with Akuma. He then mentioned the possibility of involving the police and pressing charges. The suggestion carried a formal, irreversible weight to it, making the situation feel even more serious. Park Ah-young immediately felt a mental blockage at the idea. Internally, she realized that this kind of action was not something she could easily accept or proceed with. At the same time, she became aware of her own unstable position in the situation, thinking that she could not confidently engage with formal authority or external systems under her current circumstances. Snowman continued speaking, saying that if she did not want to handle it herself, he could take responsibility and manage the process for her. He appeared willing to fully take control of the aftermath. Despite this, Park Ah-young quickly rejected the idea. She firmly stated that Akuma should simply be let go. She made it clear that she did not want to involve the police and did not want further escalation or continued contact with him. At this point, Akuma, fully overwhelmed by fear, began begging for forgiveness. His voice turned desperate as he repeatedly asked them to let him go. Snowman looked at him and told him bluntly that if he wanted to avoid further consequences, he should leave immediately. However, he also added that even if Akuma left now, it did not mean the situation was fully over or forgotten. Eventually, Akuma left the room. The sound of his departure left a heavy silence behind. The absence of his presence made the atmosphere feel even more tense, as if the weight of what had just happened remained suspended in the air. Snowman stood inside the room, his hands still marked with blood from the confrontation. After a brief pause, his expression shifted slightly, and he spoke in a lower tone. He apologized, saying that he had gotten carried away without thinking properly. He admitted that his actions were not ideal and that he understood he had escalated the situation more than necessary. Park Ah-young remained seated, visibly shaken and emotionally overwhelmed. She felt as though the entire situation had spiraled far beyond her intention or control. Internally, she experienced a strong sense of emotional exhaustion, as if she had been pulled into something chaotic and had lost her ability to influence the outcome. Her thoughts became unstable, and she began crying quietly, feeling both frustration and helplessness. She reflected on how, despite her attempts to maintain control, she still ended up in situations where she felt used or dragged along by others' actions. The emotional pressure made her feel like she was nearing a breaking point, unable to properly stabilize herself. In that vulnerable state, her thoughts drifted again toward Jung-hoon. The memory of him surfaced strongly in her mind, and she felt a sudden emotional pull in his direction, as if he represented something more familiar or grounding compared to everything she had just experienced. After some time, Snowman approached her again and asked if she was all right. He apologized once more, saying that he was not able to prevent the situation from escalating properly. The atmosphere remained tense, but slightly calmer than before. In the middle of this emotional aftermath, Park Ah-hyung suddenly asked Snowman his age. He responded that he was 22 years old. She then stated that she was 25, realizing that she was older than him. Snowman acknowledged this without much reaction, confirming it simply. For a brief moment, Park Ah-hyung felt mentally unsettled by her own sudden shift in focus. She could not fully understand why she had asked that question in such a situation. Then she asked him to call her Ah-hyung, using her real name. Snowman agreed to it. As the moment passed, she felt an uncomfortable, unclear sensation in her stomach, as if her emotional state was still unstable and difficult to process. Snowman then told her firmly that this was not the time for confusion or hesitation. He instructed her to stand up and move, and told her to go take a bath to clean herself and recover physically. His tone was practical and direct. Park Ah-hyung slowly realized that she had nearly lost control of her emotional state again due to everything that had happened. She agreed and began to comply. As she stood up, she felt a lingering internal disturbance, as if her thoughts were still being weighed down by the intensity of the situation. It felt like something uncomfortable was still stuck within her mind, making it difficult for her to fully stabilize herself. She thought that she needed to remove that feeling quickly in order to regain control. Meanwhile, Snowman waited outside the bathroom door and asked her again if she was all right or if she had any injuries. He added that if she started feeling unwell, she should inform him immediately. However, Park Ah-hyung did not answer directly. She simply said that she would come out soon. Jin-woong, after the earlier confrontation, quietly stepped aside and removed his clothes that had bloodstains on them. He considered that it would be better to clean everything properly rather than leave it like this. At the same time, even while focusing on that task, his mind kept drifting back to Park Ah-hyung. Meanwhile, Park Ah-hyung was inside the bathroom taking a bath, trying to regain her composure. As the warm water surrounded her, her thoughts remained unsettled. She recalled the earlier situation with discomfort and frustration, thinking that even though that pathetic man had tried to forcefully impose himself on her for a moment, she was still once again placed in a situation where she had to rely on another man. That realization made her internally uncomfortable, and she found herself rejecting the idea of being dependent in that way. At the same time, she reflected more deeply on what she actually wanted from her situation. She thought that, despite everything, she still wanted to be seen by a man who could genuinely impress her. In her mind, that kind of man would be someone strong, steady, masculine, and also considerate, someone who was not just physically capable, but also mentally composed and respectful in his behavior. As she continued thinking, her mind gradually shifted toward Jin-woong. She began recalling his behavior and personality more clearly. She thought that he seemed soft-spoken and somewhat shy, and although awkward at times, that side of him felt unexpectedly genuine to her. In her perception, that awkwardness did not feel negative. Instead, it appeared somewhat endearing. She started considering him as a decent person overall, someone who did not carry the same unpleasant energy as others she had encountered that day. While thinking about him, she slowly began to focus more on his presence in her mind. She absent-mindedly started her self-training routine again, as she often did when trying to regulate her thoughts. During this process, her mind became more fixed on him, and she gradually formed the thought that she wanted to continue some form of structured physical training with him, as it felt like a more stable and grounding interaction compared to everything else she had experienced recently. Outside the bathroom, Jin-woong was still nearby, cleaning the stained clothes carefully while his thoughts remained divided. While trying to wash away the physical signs of the earlier situation, he also kept worrying about Ah-hyung. He wondered again and again whether she was all right, and whether she had been hurt or emotionally affected by what had happened. That concern stayed in his mind as he worked. Suddenly, he heard a noise coming from inside the bathroom. The sound immediately caught his attention and made him stop what he was doing. Without hesitation, he quickly moved toward the bathroom area to check on her condition. When he arrived, he asked her directly if she was okay. Park Ah-young responded that she was fine. She was still inside the bathroom, appearing emotionally and physically exhausted from everything that had happened earlier, but she tried to steady herself while speaking. After a brief moment, she told him to come inside. Jin-woong, concerned about her condition, entered the bathroom area. She was there in a visibly drained and exhausted state. At that moment, Park Ah-young suddenly expressed a request to him. She asked if he could perform a training session with her. Her tone was direct but not forceful, as if she was trying to redirect her focus towards something structured and controlled. After a brief pause, Jin-woong agreed. Following his agreement, both of them began engaging in a structured physical training session together. After completing the endurance training, Park Ah-young spoke to Jin-woong in a slightly firm but controlled tone. She told him that when performing a workout session with a girl, he should behave in a more humble and considerate manner. She added that he should check on her properly, ask if she is doing well. Jin-woong listened quietly and then simply responded that he understood. He accepted her words without arguing or questioning them, keeping his tone calm and respectful. After that, Ah-young continued speaking as if summarizing the session. She said that it felt like they had completed the training together properly. Jin-woong, following her lead, asked her about her experience and how she felt about it. After a brief pause, he said that it had been really good. At that moment, something subtle shifted in Ah-young's expression and voice. Without intending to, she let out a low, unsettling tone as she responded, one that sounded unusually heavy and unnatural compared to her normal way of speaking. The moment it left her, she herself became aware of it. She fell silent for a moment and internally reacted to it with discomfort, as if she had momentarily lost control of her usual composure. That strange feeling lingered in her mind, and her thoughts slowly drifted away from the present moment. Almost unconsciously, her mind shifted back toward Jung-hoon again. His image resurfaced in her thoughts, pulling her attention away from Jin-woong and the current situation, as if her emotions were once again becoming tangled with memories and unresolved focus on him. Park Ah-young had gone to the clothing store on the other side of the area and was now standing in front of the mirror, slowly trying on different styling outfits. As she looked at herself, she tried to maintain a calm expression and told herself that she looked acceptable somehow. While adjusting the clothes slightly, her mind kept drifting back to what had happened before they left the motel. That moment felt strangely stuck in her memory, repeating in fragments rather than as a complete thought. She tried to organize her thoughts, but her attention kept slipping, as if something had interrupted her mental clarity and left her unable to fully settle. In that unstable mental state, she kept feeling as if she could still hear Jung-hoon's voice, somewhere in her memory. It was not an actual sound, but more like a lingering impression that kept resurfacing without permission. After that sensation appeared, everything else in her mind felt harder to focus on. Jin-woong, who had been standing behind her during this, quietly observed her reaction. After a short pause, he asked if she had been waiting for a long time. She turned slightly and asked him the same question in return, checking whether he had been waiting too long instead. Jin-woong calmly replied that it was fine and that he had not been waiting much at all. Even though his answer was simple, Park Ah-young internally made a decision not to let her attention drift toward him too much at that moment. Her mind felt too unstable, and she did not want to become emotionally involved in anything unnecessary. Instead, she said firmly that she did not want to stay in those strange clothes for even another second longer. She wanted to leave the store as soon as possible. Jin-woong, holding the shopping bag, looked at her outfit again and commented that it actually suited her and looked pretty. The moment she heard that, her reaction became slightly tense. She told him that he should not say things like that so casually, because it made her feel uncomfortable in a way she could not properly explain. Internally, she tried to push away the feeling. After that, she decided to leave the clothing store completely. While walking out together, the atmosphere between them became slightly more direct. Suddenly, she asked Jin-woong if he really hated her. The question came out abruptly, and it clearly surprised him. He looked at her with confusion, as if he was trying to understand where that assumption came from. She continued speaking without waiting too long, saying that he was acting as if he did not understand anything. She brought up the earlier situation at the board game cafe, saying that he had acted tough there and had been picking fights or creating unnecessary tension, which had made the entire situation feel more chaotic than it needed to be. Jin-woong tried to explain himself carefully. He said that it was not like that, and that they had already set the schedule before the meetup. He explained that he had simply been trying to follow what was planned, but things became awkward because he was worried and unsure how to behave properly in that situation. Park Ah-young responded that she had never acted in such a way herself. Then she added that he was not like her at all, as if drawing a clear line between them. Jin-woong, still slightly flustered, replied that she was actually pretty, and that because of that, people naturally kept looking at her. He also added that since the meetup was mostly all men, her presence alone was enough to draw attention, and there was not much anyone could do about that. Hearing this, she paused for a moment. Internally, she processed his words more carefully than she showed outwardly. She realized that he had been observing her more closely than she initially assumed. At the same time, she began comparing him mentally with the other men she had encountered before. Unlike others who felt chaotic or unpredictable, his behavior felt slightly more straightforward and easier to interpret, even if still awkward. However, she quickly shifted the conversation again, telling him that he should not assume things so easily, especially when it came to conditioning training. She said that he lacked proper boundaries in how he spoke about such things. She added that in situations like drinking parties or group meetups, if someone made it obvious that they were interested in doing something like that with women, they should at least maintain some level of manners and self-awareness. While speaking, her thoughts became slightly conflicted. She admitted, in a complicated way, that part of the situation might also be her fault, because she appeared pretty like that. At the same time, she acknowledged that Jinwoong was not bad-looking either. She then stated more firmly that she would admit it directly. She was pretty, she had a decent body, and people often reacted strongly to her because of that. Jinwoong, slightly overwhelmed by her tone, agreed in a more subdued manner that part of what she said was understandable, and that he also had some responsibility in how situations tended to develop. After a short pause, Jinwoong asked if she was hungry. She replied that she was. They then decided to go to a nearby restaurant that he knew about. When they arrived, Jinwoong commented that the place looked quite expensive. Without hesitation, Park Ah-young said that she would pay for the meal. They sat down together and began eating. Jinwoong admitted that he had never eaten food like this before, which made the experience feel new and slightly unfamiliar to him. During the meal, she repeatedly encouraged him to eat, without worrying about the cost. The atmosphere gradually became calmer compared to earlier. At some point, Jinwoong started speaking more openly, saying that he did not fully understand how the situation had developed earlier, and that he felt as if he might have acted in a way similar to the other men who had caused her trouble before. Hearing this, Park Ah-young reflected briefly, and realized that he seemed more naive than she had initially thought. She then told him that if she had made him feel overly excited or affected during their training sessions, she would take responsibility for it. Internally, she also acknowledged that he seemed to have genuinely enjoyed the training, even if he struggled to express it clearly. After finishing the meal, Jinwoong asked if it was okay for him not to drop her home. She replied that it was fine. Then she took his phone and entered her number into it, telling him to call her and not wait for her to contact him first. He agreed without objection. Just before leaving, Jinwoong stopped her and asked what she planned to do about Akuma, considering what had happened earlier. She responded that he should leave it alone and that she did not want anything further to do with him. Jinwoong insisted that he could handle it if she wanted, but she firmly told him not to get involved, saying that he would only end up getting hurt. To make him back off, she lightly stepped on his foot and told him that he was too soft-hearted and should just listen to her and go home. She reassured him that she was fine and thanked him for everything, once again telling him not to do anything unnecessary. Eventually, he agreed. After returning home, she received a message and briefly thought about Jinwoong, noticing that he seemed genuinely concerned and that she did not dislike him. At the same time, Jung-hoon received a message from Akuma, who described Ah-young in a distorted and negative way, and even sent a video from earlier. When Jung-hoon saw it, his reaction became intense and emotionally charged, as he felt frustration and jealousy at the idea that someone else had been involved in that situation with her. On the other side, Park Ah-young also received a system message indicating that her mission had failed. The message stated that, although she had caused significant emotional disturbance in the target, she had not earned any points from the outcome. Ah-young was driving the car in complete silence, while her thoughts remained occupied with Jung-hoon. The more she reflected on everything that had happened between them, the more she became convinced that he was truly nothing more than a pathetic loser. She thought about how much she had endured for his sake, and how hard she had tried to make things work despite everything.